It's a pleasure to welcome with us a guest who is without question the leading expert on social media law in this country. And if you are someone who regularly posts on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on any other platform, you really should keep her number on speed dial, because the day you get it wrong, this is the call you're going to want to make. And when it comes to the social media oopsies and worse, Emma Sadleir is the person who gets called. She's seen it all, I think she's heard it all, and she's now written a book about it all to help you, and particularly your teens, to not make those mistakes in the first place. Emma, it's great to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
The book is called Selfies, Sexts and Smartphones, a teenager's online survival guide. I should at this point just mention your co-author, Dr. Lizzie Harrison. She's a medical doctor.
She's a medical doctor. She studied in England, and she did an undergraduate in neuroscience. So she's particularly interested in brain development and what screens and addiction to cell phones are doing to young people's brains.
Okay, that's a really interesting chapter towards the end of the book about the amount of time that you're spending online, what's happening in young people's brains while they're engaged online, and also what's not happening, the creativity that's been drained away.
And sleep.
And sleep, yeah. So we might have some time to go into that in detail. But really, what made you to decide that there was a need for a book like this, aimed specifically at teenagers?
Yeah, so I worked at a big law firm for 5 years. I went on my own 4 years ago, which means that I'm actually rather old now. I still feel like it was just the other day. But I started on my own, and I decided to specialize in social media and the legal consequences of social media. What I realized quite quickly is actually reputational harm is so much more serious than any possible legal action, because even though the wheels of justice turn very slowly in South Africa, the long-term harm is your reputation. And I think the appreciation that everybody has become a celebrity in the digital age, even our children, and we need to start managing that online reputation from a young age. So I speak publicly every day, pretty much. I speak at corporates about managing risks of employees getting it wrong on social media. And then my real passion is what's going on with the children, because I've felt for a long time that by giving children who are very young smartphones, we're giving them a lot of rope to hang themselves, and by not educating them, we're saying go ahead. You know, I really feel that we're failing children, because the errors that they make now at a very young age have the potential to impact them far down the line. You know, I was reminded recently, actually I was at a wedding in Stellenbosch on Saturday, and I saw somebody who consulted me a long time ago now about a social media error. It was a photograph taken at a 21st birthday party, and he's now finished university, he studied law, did exceptionally well, and is simply unable to get a job, because when you Google him, what comes up is that he's racist, or that he wore a racist costume to a 21st birthday party while he was at university. So it's those kind of things which really, really affect you, actually. So, you know, nowhere is it more apposite that prevention is better than cure. So we give these talks, these educational talks around the country to schools every day. And we just, you know, there are only two of us, so there are only so many people we can actually speak to. So I'm hoping that, that parents buy this book for their children, and that children actually read it, that it doesn't just sit on the bookshelf. So we've tried to write it in a very, you know, cool, I don't know if it's even cool to say cool, is it? There's some kids in the audience. Tone. We did get checked by many who, well, we thought very cool teenagers, who gave us some feedback, and I hope that we've got it right, and I hope that they do actually find it interesting, and that they do actually read it.
I think you got it just right. So my teenager is only 13, and the little bit that she started reading before I took it away and carried on taking copious notes, she was enjoying and saying was very helpful. So I think you have nailed it there. And really, I want to say again, it's a book worth reading, even if you are not yourself a teen or even the parent of a teen. I learned so much about what I was doing wrong.
I think the first person to read it after I finished it was my brother, and he said, "Why did you put teenager on the cover? This is for everybody." So I said, well, you know, the first book was, I suppose, a little bit more thorough than this. Obviously, the laws have changed, the rules have changed, the platforms that we use are changing all the time. So the first book was called Don't Film Yourself Having Sex, and in hindsight, I should have called it something incredibly boring, like A Pocket Guide to Social Media, because the parents weren't buying it for their children, who were the ones who really needed to read it, because they were like, well, my 13-year-old's not having sex, I'm not buying them a book about not filming yourself having sex. And I was like, well, it wasn't really about filming yourself having sex, it was a catchy title, and also very, very good legal advice.
Okay.
But yeah, you know, for those reasons. And also, it was maybe a little bit, it wasn't a legal textbook, the first one, but maybe a little bit heavy for a young audience. So what we have tried to do is create something that's short enough for them actually to read, and in a language, hopefully, that they understand.
Yeah, I think you got it just right. I want to get a sense of how often you are dealing with some of the problems that you raise in this book, because, of course, we know the headlines. We've all heard the story of the Penny Sparrows, the Diane Kohler Barnards, but those are just the people who are newsmakers. They're in the news headlines. They're famous, perhaps. I know there are lots of smaller cases behind the scenes that are coming to your practice day in and day out. How big a problem is it?
It's absolutely massive, and I think that I call myself the first responder, because I think that when people find themselves in these huge crises, they don't know where to go. The police are ill-equipped. I know it's a generalization, but generally, if you go to a police station now and you say that there are naked pictures of me that have been circulated around my school or put on the internet, the police are going to say, well, you shouldn't have taken the pictures, or can we see the pictures? And I'm afraid that's the reality that a lot of victims face. The two biggest issues by far, certainly at every school in the country, every school I've spoken to, are cyberbullying and sexting. And I would say I get probably 5 new cases of victims of revenge pornography, usually students, usually school kids, a day. And cyberbullying, again, every single day. And it's funny, Pippa, because when I went on my own, I thought it was going to be too niche. I thought I was going to be too specialized and it was going to get boring. And let me tell you, there is nothing niche, nothing specialized about it. It's so broad because it's all the same legal issues, just on a new platform. So there are issues now that we couldn't have possibly foreseen that we'd be communicating the way we do now, even when we drafted our constitution, which is one of the best constitutions in the world, 1996, it was passed. So our laws are often hopelessly outdated. I spend a lot of time making submissions to Parliament, written and oral submissions. We've just been very involved with the Cyber Crimes Bill submissions, where they've specifically criminalized revenge pornography, which is very, very important and very welcome legislative change. So what really happens is that I really run a pro bono practice dealing with victims of revenge pornography and bullying, but not just children, of course, adults too.
We are going to talk about the cyberbullying and sexting aspects in detail later in this discussion. If you've just tuned in and are wondering who you're listening to, my guest for the duration of this hour is Emma Sadlier, a social media specialist in the field of law, but also the author with Dr. Lizzie Harrison of Selfies, Sexts and Smartphones, a teenager's online survival guide. The sort of mantra running throughout the book is to be wary of the fact that digital content is dangerous content. Why?
Yeah, so when I started giving these talks, I used to say, if you wouldn't put it on a massive billboard next to a huge photograph of your face, if you're a child, imagine yourself in school uniform, your name, the name of the school you go to, or if you're employed, the name of the company you work for, and whatever it is you were about to say on social media. So that was my message initially. But my message has changed, and it's changed fundamentally, because my message now is, if you wouldn't put it on that billboard, don't let it exist in digital format. Not inside your phone, not inside somebody else's phone, nowhere in the digital ether. And the primary reason I say it, Pippa, is because of the screenshot. The screenshot, the screen grab, whatever you want to call it. It's the devil. It's changed the game. It's turned what historically was a fairly temporary, transient conversation, something you'd say to your mate over lunch, into something potentially permanent and potentially publishable. And I've seen a huge transition in my practice from people messing up on platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, to people messing up in more private conversations. Somebody takes a screenshot or a screen grab, and that gets published more broadly. I also said, because phones get lost, phones get stolen. You might have something on your phone you never intended anyone to see, and then somebody steals your phone, and the next thing, that picture is a meme and all over the internet. And the third reason, I guess, is because phones get hacked. Emails get hacked. You don't have to look much further than South African politics at the moment. The Gupta leaks, the Cyril Ramaphosa hacking. Digital content is dangerous content. So if you wouldn't put it on a billboard, don't let it exist in digital format, not inside your phone, not inside somebody else's phone, nowhere in the digital ether.
I was pretty horrified to read examples of cases where teenagers' phones had been stolen and used deliberately for blackmail purposes.
Absolutely. So we see a lot of blackmail going on. There's actually a word that we've invented in the last couple of years called sextortion.
Sure.
Which is when somebody gets hold of usually naked pictures, nude pictures of you, and then used against you in some way. You know, pay me lots of money, otherwise I'm going to send this around the school, or I'm going to put it on the internet, or, you know, and not just children. I had somebody actually from Cape Town who contacted me who had been in a long relationship with somebody, had been dealing with this person for 8 months and had sent nudes after literally 8 months of chatting online. And he said, well, I've been following your 12-year-old son on Instagram, and unless you pay me 5,000 Rand to my e-wallet, I'm going to send it to him and to all of his friends who I'm following. So sextortion is a very big issue. Blackmailing generally, you know, so I think appreciating how important it is to look after your online reputation, not just your digital footprint, which is what you're uploading about yourself, but also looking after what I call your digital shadow, which is what other people are uploading about you. You know, Prince Harry used to have to worry when he went to a nightclub and he drank too many tequilas, who was taking pictures of him because they'd land up in the tabloid press. But now we're all that person. And if you are out and you get it wrong in a public place, or even at a private party with these kids, and you do something remotely embarrassing or obscene or illegal or inappropriate, there's somebody taking pictures of you. So it's teaching the children to treat themselves as celebrities from a very young age, and to treat their friends and often their family as the paparazzi. And, you know, the same billboard test applies. If they wouldn't put it on the billboard, then don't let people take pictures of them doing things that they wouldn't want their principal or the police or their parents to see.
Easier said than done. I'm glad you mentioned the principal, the police, and the parents, because you talk about the 6 Ps that you should do a little check mentally before you post. Would I be happy for my parents to see this, the police, the principal, also pedophiles, fishers, and your prospective employers? Thinking about criminal consequences, thinking about safety consequences, as well as reputation. You speak about the part of the problem being what is lost on social media when you post something versus saying it to somebody's face. You're missing several crucial cues about the meaning of what you're saying. Won't you just elaborate on that?
So I think, you know, I always talk about the 3 reasons that it's difficult to particularly joke on social media, that you lose context, you lose tone, and you lose control over your audience. And context is a very important one. You know, what happened before, what happened afterwards. We often only look at the one tweet, even if you're publishing a series. You know, when Helen Ziller was tweeting about colonialism, or Really Clubby was tweeting about the Walk the Talk tweet, which was so controversial within this organization. And there's a series of tweets, you know, 1 of 6, 2 of 6, 3 of 6. It's only 3 of 6 that goes viral. You know, and people aren't even looking what came before and what came afterwards. You're looking at it specifically within the 4 corners of that status. So context is something that disappears very quickly. Tone, very important. You know, what I say to you now, hopefully you can tell if I'm joking, but it's very difficult to get tone within the 4 corners of digital content. Emojis help. You know,
smiley face tells you.
They do. A wink. Yeah. I was speaking at a school last week, and I said a winky, not a winky, a wink face. They were all laughing. A wink face at the end of a sentence can connote sarcasm. You know, we've actually got case law that says that exact thing, but it's tricky. And tone. I mean, so context, tone, and then your control of your audience, because what's funny to you and your friends isn't going to be funny to somebody on the other side of the planet. Partly because with youth culture, children speak in a different language sometimes, your vocabulary. I was speaking at a school 2 weeks ago, and I asked for some examples, and the one kid said, well, dope. I thought that's a good one, because dope to you probably means cool, and to me it means drugs. And then another kid said, lit. So I said, that's brilliant, lit. And then I turned to the teachers who were all sitting in a sort of a bank on the side. I said, teachers, do you know what lit means? So the one teacher looked at me absolutely serious, didn't even know she was being funny. And she was like, yeah, literature. I had to stop the talk. I was crying. I was laughing so much. But, you know, it's that kind of thing. And then you're probably 90% of the Cape Talk audience is asking themselves, but lit does mean literature, right? So it's those kind of things that, you know, the message gets lost often on social media. If Trevor Noah tweets something, the presumption is that he's trying to be funny. When I tweet something, I'm not trying to be funny. I'm a boring lawyer.
The boring lawyer, anything but, is Emma Sadlier, author of Selfies, Sex and Smartphones. If you've got a question, if you're worrying about an interaction that you've seen on your teenager's phone, or if you've got a question about your own security, please give us a call on 021 446 0567. You're welcome to leave a voice note on 072 567 1567. Or you can send an SMS, as Warren has done. Warren heard you mentioning the fact that we are giving children smartphones too young. He wants to know if you have a sense of when is a good time, a sort of minimum age that you would regard as okay.
So I've just started a nationwide campaign, and I think social media, I think smartphones should be banned for children under the age of 13. I think that your child will tell you that they need a phone. Get them a dumb phone. They do not need a smartphone. Giving a 9-year-old an iPhone is a completely mad idea. They're just too powerful. The simple rule also is that as soon as they've got a smartphone, they're looking at pornography. I think the average age of first exposure to pornography in South Africa at the moment is 11, although I'd say at some schools it's younger. Now, it's not the kind of pornography that I was first exposed to, which was a nude picture of a girl in a Playboy magazine that somebody's father had under the bed. You know, it's hardcore porn. And because we're still quite a conservative society, I don't think we necessarily talk to our children about the kind of content that they're viewing, inappropriate content. We've got a whole generation of children growing up thinking that what they're seeing in pornography is the real world, and I'm afraid it's not. Well, I'm actually quite pleased it's not, to be honest. But I think we need to start having that conversation. So under the age of 13, no smartphones. The 3 key features that I really worry about with smartphones is the internet connection, because it turns everyone into a publisher, which suddenly means that the same rules and laws that are imposed on you, Pippa Hudson, as a journalist broadcasting to lots of people at the same time, now suddenly applies to those kids, even though they're young, even on a WhatsApp group, even if it's not, on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. And those laws can be quite tricky. What is defamation? What is privacy? Criminal injury, harassment, all these rules. So the internet connection concerns me, the screenshot capability concerns me, and the camera concerns me because of the paparazzi issues we were talking about earlier.
Okay, so no under 13s in answer to the question. Warren, thanks so much for that question. Ray SMSing to say, could you please tell me what recourse I would have? My former employer is using my photograph for the past 3 years as an advert on their recruitment website page without my consent.
No, that's not allowed. So presumably there was a sort of a consent when you were, or at least a tacit consent while you were employed, but now that you're no longer working for that company, they shouldn't be using your image at all. So we're a little bit behind the global curve when it comes to image rights and particularly celebrity endorsement, but we still have something similar, and he should definitely ask for them to delete it. If they don't delete it, then he should give me a call.
Okay. Ray?
I'm not touting Law Society, I promise. I won't charge them.
Ray, thanks for your SMS and good luck tackling it. We are going to talk about that issue of publication after the news at 2:30. I want to leave us a good chunk of time to really dig into what it means. But quickly, in the few minutes before we head into news, let's talk about what we can do, all of us, adults as well as teens, to look after our safety online. What are some of the steps we can take to try and protect ourselves as far as we can?
So rule number 1 is always the billboard test. I think people are getting very tired of it, but it is still the ultimate rule. Being very careful about touching your phone in the heat of the moment. Often when you're very angry, when you're overwhelmed by something, you're furious, you're hungry, or as I call it, hangry, you're overtired, you're drunk. Drunk social media ring or digital contenting is very dangerous. Any time when your faculties could be compromised, and I have a very scientific algorithm, Pippa, which I call the jump in the tummy test. When I'm just about to press post, tweet, send, share, and I get the jump in my tummy, then immediately what must pop up in your mind is the billboard. Would I put it on this billboard? And if you have something controversial to say to somebody, say it to their face and make sure they're not recording, because then at least somebody can't take a screenshot and put it online. So I think that's an important rule. I think also understanding how the platforms work. What rights you're giving up when you tick that box saying, I agree to your terms and conditions, knowing that these companies don't owe you anything. When someone gives you something for free, they don't owe you anything. So understanding that they can change their terms and conditions whenever they want to, and understanding that when you get something for free, you should be a bit skeptical and cynical. If I get Facebook, Instagram, Gmail, WhatsApp for free, you should be asking yourself, how am I getting these platforms for free? Because they're awesome. It's not normal. I grew up with my dad saying to me, Emma, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So when I get something for free, I want to know, how the hell do I get this thing for free? And in simple terms, the rule on the internet is if you get something for free, you are the product. Simple as that.
Let that digest for a moment. It's pretty serious stuff. Obviously, we've been very aware this week of hacking and people's details being shared all over the world, including millions of us here in South Africa. What can we do to protect ourselves against that?
So very good question, very important question. Having good passwords and not telling your passwords to anybody is a good thing. Now, a good password is not password. It's not password 123, and it's not password with an @ sign as an A. So basically what the new literature is telling us about passwords is that instead of having uppercase, lowercase, symbol, number, have 3 completely random words like clipboard, yellow, ceiling, and put them next to each other. And that's much less likely that it'll be hacked. Also, there are these amazing websites, and I'll tweet a link and put on Facebook a link to websites where you can go and check to see if you have been hacked. It'll tell you when you were hacked and which account was hacked. And that means that if you have been using the same password across platforms, you should change those passwords. With the children, it's a big issue because there's something called Snapchat streaks. So streaks are something you want to keep up. And basically what it means that every day you have to do something on Snapchat which keeps up your streaks. So if you're going to the game reserve with your parents and you know you're not going to have signal, then you give your password to your friends so that they can keep up their streaks while you don't have signal. Where your parents have probably paid a huge premium to go somewhere that doesn't have signal so they can actually have a conversation with their children, which is something that we're actually seeing, the emergence of, I certainly pay a premium to go somewhere without signal. The digital detox is a crucial thing that we should all know what it means and be actively pursuing it. So not sharing your password with anyone, even your very best friend, because I've dealt with cases where the very best friend has been in a fight with the person and then has gone onto their Instagram accounts and written the most vicious things pretending to be that person. So not giving your password to anybody.
We continue our conversation with Emma Sadlier, who's the co-author of the book Sex, Selfies and Smartphones, a guide for teenagers and all the rest of us as well on navigating the space of social media and the online world. Interesting to get a WhatsApp here from Karen, who says, I gave my son a phone on his 13th birthday. He was one of the last in his school, and his objection to a dumb phone was that he could be on the class and sports WhatsApp groups in grade 8, which amongst the rubbish disseminated was actually information we needed. She was quite stumped as how to respond to that, because there is a place for these. They can be really beneficial. We're not saying, and you're not saying, don't let your kids be on social media.
Not at all. So these platforms are extraordinary. From a personal and professional point of view, I remember when I left the big law firm and one of the senior partners came to say, Emma, we're worried about you. How are you going to be busy? How are you going to make clients? And I just said, well, in my sweetest voice, if it doesn't work, I'd be grateful if you take me back. I luckily never had to make that call because I've been busy every single day since I started this company. I've never spent a cent on advertising. I've never spent a cent on marketing. I've styled myself as the expert on the continent because of my social media channels. I always say the best thing about social media is that it gives everyone a voice. The worst thing about social media is that it gives everyone a voice. Some people should be denied that great power. Penny Sparrow, hello. No, but it is, I think, also a much more accurate reflection. This is not to answer your question, but a much more accurate reflection often of who people really are. It's quite easy to pretend when you are out in the world that you are a good person, but if you're actually not a nice human, then it's going to come out if you're a social media user. So I don't think that it's a question of whether we do social media. I think it's a question of how well we do it. The schools are grappling with this issue as well, because if they're going to use platforms like WhatsApp as educational tools, as an information source for children, then they're going to have to take a whole lot more responsibility about what's going on those platforms. So generally 13 is the year where when children turn 13, they're in grade 7. So it does mean that when they start their high school career, they'll be able to be on these WhatsApp groups, etc. But from the other point of view, and I'm sure there are a lot of teachers listening who rue the day that WhatsApp groups were created and invented, because suddenly they've got these kids sending them WhatsApps at midnight saying, ma'am, what's in our maths test tomorrow? The rules of the game have changed, and a lot of teachers are struggling to stay in the profession because the demands have always been enormous, but now possibly even more so, and along with that, a lot of privacy infringements too.
Okay. Someone's asked me to spell your surname. You're listening to Emma Sadlier. It's Sadleir. Sounds like someone's going to be looking you up for advice. Okay.
It's an exception to the rule, like weird and feisty.
Exceptions are always good. We've talked a little bit about the issue of publication, and I heard a few gasps in the audience when you said the words that if you post it online, it's subject to the same rules as if you'd put it into print and published it as a book. Let's talk a little bit. It's not just about the post itself, it's also about the chain of publication that follows.
Absolutely. So the publication point is incredibly important because it's really like the trigger for when the laws get when the laws kick in. So the rule with the publication laws is that as soon as the content has been seen by one other person, so really a third person, then the laws kick in. Legally, we treat that content as if you'd published it on the front page of the newspaper. So what that means is there's actually absolutely no difference in the laws that apply to what I say to you now, what I write on the front page of the Sunday Times, what I put on the billboard, and what I say on a WhatsApp group to 5 people, what I say on Facebook to 500 people, what I say on Twitter to 35,000 people. As soon as that content's been seen, then we treat it as published and all the laws kick in. Now, we've got quite complicated rules, and I think a lot of people are ignorant about the extent to which freedom of expression is a right that can be limited. You know, often when people get fired, with the FNB people on that WhatsApp group, there were 4 employees on an FNB group recently who were fired, and the default reaction to most South African public were, well, what about their rights to freedom of expression? You know, and you've got to say, well, yes, we all have the right to freedom of expression. It's a fundamental constitutional right. Actually, at the moment, Pippa, I'd go so far as to say it's the cornerstone of our democracy, but it's not an unlimited right, because my right to freedom of expression has to be balanced against other people's rights to privacy, to dignity, to reputation, to equality, to the religion. So it's difficult. Where do we draw the line between these conflicting rights? Because there isn't one right which is more important than other rights, except maybe the right to life. You know, that's usually a trump card. I will try not to say Trump again.
Case in point.
So that's important from a publication point of view. But then even more important is when I tell people about the chain of publication, because what that means is that you can be held responsible for other people's content. So, for example, Pippa, you send me something on WhatsApp, and I forward it on to one of the audience members. Even though I didn't create that content, I've become very responsible for its publication, which means that if there's anything illegal in that content, I can be held as responsible as you, and you created it. And then the extension of that is if you have the ability to stop something from being published. So if somebody writes something on your Facebook page or a comment underneath your Instagram photograph, then you become that responsible for that content as soon as you see it, because you have the ability to delete it, to remove it. And then even more startling for many people is that you are responsible for content that you have the ability to dissociate yourself from. And this comes from a case that was heard in the Pretoria High Court, where somebody was held responsible for a status that he had been tagged in, and he hadn't commented on it or shared it or liked it, but he had been tagged in the content and hadn't gone and untagged himself from the content. And he was told that he had to pay the same amount of damages as his wife, who had written the status, and half the legal costs. So my interpretation of that, and it's a very important point that we need to discuss, is that if you're on a WhatsApp group, and like Black Twitter at the moment has this very cool, these people are on the same WhatsApp group. It basically means they're cut from the same cloth. And you'll see it now all over now that I've told you about it. The cool kids out there would have already known about it. We say this person and this person, they're on the same WhatsApp group. But what that really means is that if you're on a WhatsApp group, there's something illegal, inappropriate, offensive going on that WhatsApp group, then you are as responsible for those people who are actively participating, even if you're an innocent bystander, because you have the ability to remove yourself from that content, to dissociate yourself from that content. You can leave the group or say, hey guys, this isn't cool, we shouldn't be bullying this poor girl. And if you don't, you're as responsible as the active participants.
But now I went on that 2-week no internet holiday to Madagascar in July. What if someone posted something like that on my page while I was away?
Firstly, I just want to say I'm so jealous. Bring it on. No, but we have a defense that we call the defense of innocent dissemination, which basically means you're responsible only when you become aware of it. So if we take it all the way back to a case in the 1930s where somebody sued the CNA, the bookstore, for something that it was pornography, I think, in a book when, the bad old days when pornography was still illegal. And they sued the CNA, and the CNA said, but we didn't know about it because we can't be expected to know about every word of every page of every book, magazine, and newspaper we sell. But the second I write the CNA or Exclusive Books or anybody else who's in the chain of publication a letter saying, look, there's child pornography on page 4 of that book you're selling, stop selling it. The second they receive that notification, they lose the defense of innocent dissemination. They must step into the shoes of the person who wrote it, either take it off their shelves or be able to defend it on one of the defenses.
Okay. We're going to get to some questions from the audience, but just before we do that, we've got a caller on the line from Greenpoint. Andrew with a question about copyright, I believe. Andrew, good afternoon.
Afternoon, Pippa. How are you doing? And afternoon, Emma.
Thanks for calling.
Thank you so much for the show. I have maybe an interesting question about copyright and imaging. I'm wondering about cases of found images. I'm sort of thinking about Vivian Mayer and one or two cases like that, where there's possibly no estate attached to the images. So you've just found them and you have no idea of who is the owner of the images. What are you, as an individual who's found the images, allowed to do with them?
Can I just clarify, as those images that you just found on Google?
No, physical, like let's say a box of negatives or whatever it may be.
Okay. I think that's a slightly more specific issue that you'd probably need to consult an IP lawyer on. Where we do see copyright issues a lot on social media is this idea that people think that it's a complete free-for-all, that if there's something online, I can just use it. And the law is that to a certain extent. Certainly for the media, if the media wanted to publish pictures that have been Instagrammed, for example, or put on Facebook by somebody that they're doing a story about, there are intellectual property considerations there because copyright subsists automatically. Maybe to go back to the question, as soon as I take a photograph or I write a story, provided the work is of a sufficient quality, then the copyright subsists automatically. With trademark, we have to go and register the trademark, whereas with copyright, you don't actually have to do anything. That right subsists automatically. And I think that where people are finding themselves in trouble often is where they just take other people's pictures that they found on the internet and then just repurpose them for whatever use they want to. There are some fair use exceptions. So, for example, if you wanted to write a story about Emma Sadler and you find out that I don't know, for some reason I've been making it up or I've bought all my law degrees or something and you want to write a whole story about it and so you want to use, for example, my profile picture on Facebook. The person who took that picture has the copyright, but you would be able to use it because you have a sort of a newsworthy defense, provided you, and this is a very important rule out there for anybody wanting to use pictures they find online, provided they state the author if it appears on the work. So if I tweeted it, it would be under my name, or if I've watermarked that picture, then that's important. You must include the author if it appears on the work, and you must include the source. So if I get it from Facebook, I must say I got this picture from Facebook.
Okay. Andrew, thanks for your call. Let's go to the questions from the audience, starting with the lady in blue in front. Good afternoon.
It couldn't be more synchronistic right now for this. Right now, I'm sitting with a lot of information on my cell phone, and I'll be tweeting as well as posting it on my Facebook and forwarding the latest in not only neuroscience to do with cell phone radiation that causes cancer. Also, Chandi Modisi, she is dead serious about it. I'm working with doctors and scientists internationally about the harm of cell phone radiation and Wi-Fi. So yes, I'm busy with a project called Resilience to Risk. I do talks about cyber safety, cyberbullying, and also I'm electrohypersensitive. I've just had a brain scan done, and I've been collapsing, so this is a big issue, so obviously I want to engage with Emma a little bit later after this. So my big question is, we will be raising the awareness of what it is and what is the risk to us from the big corporations that's putting up these cell phone towers. Thank you.
Emma?
So, yeah, I mean, we didn't include much of that in the book because there seems to be a lot of conflicting evidence out there about just how harmful radiation is. What we do talk a lot about is blue light, and blue light particularly emitting from screens, and how the children are just not sleeping because they're utterly exhausted. So to be very rudimentary and simplistic about it, your body has melatonin in it, and melatonin makes you sleep, and the more you look at screens, the more blue light emits out of those screens and eats all the melatonin in your body. If you just think about it like that, that's probably the most basic way of thinking about it. And because these children are on their phones all day, every day, I was speaking at a school the other day, and they said that of the 24 children in grade 4 in this one class, 21 of them were on prescribed melatonin to help them sleep. And that's a pretty mad idea, is that these children are just just not sleeping. And when I speak at schools now, I say, who here has trouble sleeping? And 3/4 of them will put up their hand. And I think that's a crazy, crazy thing, because when I was a kid, sleep, I mean, you didn't want to go to bed ever, but when you went to sleep, you slept. And I didn't know any friends who suffered from insomnia or had any issues sleeping. And the teachers are saying that they're arriving utterly exhausted. It's particularly harmful for any children with ADD or ADHD. So I think a real appreciation for how harmful blue light is for sleep, for anxiety, for depression, huge increases in both of those things. And also particularly for very young children, we've seen the emergence of the iPad as a pacifier. And that's a crazy, crazy idea, you know, because all the brain development really happens in the first 2 years of life. And these children are just staring at screens blindly, and parents, and you know, it's a difficult one, because sometimes you just need to really chill out and have a glass of wine with a friend. And if the 2-year-old is kept quiet by the iPad for 20 minutes, and you can just, you know, regain some sense of sanity, then maybe that can be good. But I think just starting to be aware of how harmful the screen time can be, particularly for little people, is very important.
Thanks for that. Another question from the audience? From the lady in black. Good afternoon.
Yes, I'm Lindsay. I want to know, Emma, I am the mum of a 16-year-old daughter, particularly with reference to chain of publication. Should I be checking her phone?
It's the famous question of, you know, do we trust our children to make the right decisions? And I think that my view is that you give them a phone which is owned by you, and that they are entitled to use with certain conditions being met. And if they do not meet those conditions, then the phone gets taken away. Now, that's I mean, it's a very strict rule, of course, but one of those rules, I say, until you're quite confident that they're making the right decisions, and for some children that could be 14, for some children that could be 18. For me, it was probably about 25. No, but really, because when we talk about it in the book, and it was one of the most interesting things I learned from Dr. Lizzie, was that the brain develops from the back to the front. Now, everybody probably knows this. I didn't know this. So the part of your brain which is responsible for decision making is the frontal lobe, and that's what develops last. Now, I thought, okay, well, it develops last, but surely it's all done by 18 or 16, and no, 25. Yeah, when you are 25 is when your brain finishes developing. So that explains why I did a lot of the things that I did at university. Thank goodness there was no social media to keep a permanent account of that. But I think that's fascinating, that 25 is when your brain finishes developing. Now, given that there can be such long-term consequences for your child, I think it's absolutely incumbent on parents to know what their children are up to. And for everyone, that's different degrees. I think maybe the analogy is, when would you let your child go to a party where you know there's going to be drugs and alcohol? I think it's when you're quite confident that they're going to make the right decisions. And so that's obviously, that's a parental discretion. But I think certainly if you've got any kind of reasonable suspicion, it sounds like a very legal term for a parenting act, but a reasonable suspicion that they're getting it wrong, then you must intervene. But I think from a parenting point of view, what's very important is to know which platforms they're on. Even when they're 16, even though they're a bit older, know which platforms they're on and know how those platforms work. Follow your children and engage on the platforms, because there's no way your child can keep themselves safe on a platform like Snapchat if the parents don't know how Snapchat works. Because then, like 3 weeks ago when there's a rolling out of Snap Maps and suddenly they're monitoring your location, your children aren't going to know that unless you're on the platform yourself. And I promise you, there is some bored housewife in South Carolina who has prepared one A4 document which will tell you, these are the pros, these are the cons, should my child, and they give them ratings, you know, should my child be using Minecraft, League of Legends, which games should they be playing, what is Instagram safety, what are the privacy issues around Musical.ly or Lively. Everything seems to be going live at the moment. So the only way you can really, I think, keep your children safe is to know which platforms they're on, follow their activity on the platforms, and be on the platform yourself.
Sounds like I need to go and get a crash course in Minecraft this afternoon. Yeah. Let's just check that microphone's on, please. I gather the previous question didn't quite come through on air, but good afternoon to the lady in green.
Hi, Emma.
Hi.
I am stressed now listening to you. God. I've got a 7-year-old daughter, and she's friends with grade 2 learners. That's her age, and like till 9. And I thought I knew which platform she was on, because I love the idea of playing Minecraft. I can't play it because there's some things that I like her doing or developing. Till one day I realized that she's hiding something from me, and I did not even know how to use the tablet which we got her. And then I went on to the history, and there was YouTube 6 videos. And I asked her why, and she said at school she and a friend asked her, do you know what is sex? So I'll go online and go check. So we did not put the safety parameters on our thing because we thought she's 7 and she's sweet and we know her and we all those things, good things. But she went because she was curious. And then I saw it, and I saw all these things, and I freaked out, and now my child is a freak, according to me. And then I asked her, why did you have to look at so many of those? And she said, because she was like, is that it? And so she went to the next one, because she was looking for what, I don't know what she thought. My question is, how do can I erase this hard drive, which is my child's mind? And secondly, do I not allow her to play any of these games anymore? Because the thing about Wi-Fi, so do I switch the Wi-Fi on? Do I download the game, just play that My Little Ponies, and that's about it? Or what? I don't know.
I think it's very difficult to keep children innocent, to keep children. So I think you'll be doing your child an immense favor by limiting the amount of internet connectivity that she has. But also I think is the most important thing to pick up on your story is not to overreact when your children tell you, or when you find evidence that your children have been searching things they haven't been, that you didn't realize they had been. So I think that what's the most important thing is to keep the open channel of communication between your child and you, so that the next time she sees maybe not just what YouTube says about sex, but maybe some hardcore pornography on Pornhub, or even worse on Twitter. Twitter is the worst porn site in the world. There's more extreme pornography on Twitter than you'll see on any traditional pornographic platform. And so that's a pretty serious thing. But what she needs to know is that the next time she comes across inappropriate content, that she can come to you, and that you're not going to overreact, and that you can talk to her about what she's seen and discuss these issues with you. Because the problem is, she is going to come across, she is going to mess up. There is no such thing. There's not one parent here who hasn't had some kind of similar run-in with their children about what they've seen. The problem is then she won't come to you next time she sees something inappropriate, and then that discussion doesn't take place. So I think that's possibly my most important advice. I think certainly device management, not leaving the children to their own devices. A platform like Minecraft, if you invoke all the privacy settings and, on safe mode type things, then they can be great and your children can have a nice time. The biggest issues that we see with gaming, I'm jumping around to all sorts of topics. I'm conscious we're running out of time and there's so many things I want to say. The biggest issue that we see with gaming is addiction. And so when the children start using these platforms as young as 7, then we start really worrying about the addiction element, particularly with the boys. The boys are, when we say flippantly addicted to gaming platforms, really chemically addicted. Even Instagram. So what the clever people are saying at the moment is that the dopamine reaction in the brain of a 12-year-old girl who gets a follow request on Instagram, hopefully a follow request, hopefully they've got private accounts, or notification that someone has followed them or liked one of their photos, is pretty much identical to the dopamine hit in the brain of an addicted gambler sitting in the casino pressing the slot machine, or an alcoholic drinking alcohol. So when we say flippantly we're addicted, what the evidence is showing is that we're chemically addicted, and it's starting at such a young age. I spoke to one psychiatrist, Pippa, when we were researching this book, who said to me it's harder to cure screen addiction than crystal meth addiction, because we can't ever live a life without screens these days. So you can't remove the addiction. So that's quite a fascinating thing, I think. So you deal with it much more like you would deal with anorexia and bulimia, where you have to face food 3 times a day. The same thing with screen addiction.
I had an email in at the start, before we even came to air today, from Angela Notuk, and I just want to share with you because it relates to the same conversation about engaging with our kids and having the conversation. Angela's 15-year-old daughter was texting a male friend, and she says the following: based on the messages I read, he told her that he liked her. She told him she liked him too, but wasn't allowed to date. He responded first with a sad face, then sent a picture of his penis before she could reply. Now, she came to me and showed me the text. I took her phone away and we talked about what happened. She went up to bed and I told her I'd keep the phone for the night so that he didn't keep on texting her, but I don't know where to go from here. I think he's just a dumb kid who made a mistake, but he needs to know that it isn't acceptable. Do I tell his mom? What do I do?
So the sexting epidemic, I think that I would go so far as to say that sexting has become a social norm in South Africa. It's almost like the new second base. Maybe you smooch once, and then the next step is to send a nude. And it's become totally normalized. There is huge pressure being placed, particularly by boys on girls, to send nudes. Of course, it's a generalization, but it's generally what I'm seeing. I think it's a new form of gender-based violence, actually. I think that nudes are treated these days as a social currency. It's a competition who can get nudes the quickest from girls, and then we must quickly pass them around to all our friends. And the girls are, I've got one girl who landed up in the ICU at Mill Park Hospital because she tried to commit suicide because this boy kept asking her for a nude. They met at a party once. She was 13, he was 14. It happened last year. And he asked her for a nude and she said no. He asked her again, started sending voice notes. Please, 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 please. Just one. Please, please, please. I'll never ask you again. And it went on all week, and and eventually she sent one. She sent one picture. He sent it to all of his mates. And I had all the screenshots of the conversation, all the voice notes and everything. And accumulatively, in the space of 4 days, he had asked her 56 times to send a nude. From a legal point of view, we treat it as the solicitation of child pornography. You can go and lay a criminal charge against that person. If you take a picture of yourself naked and you're under the age of 18, it's the creation of child pornography. And of course, any sending of that content, even if you didn't create it, is the distribution of child pornography. Even possession of child pornography is a strict liability offense. We're in the process of hopefully changing some of those laws, because the problem at the moment is that it treats the victim as the perpetrator. If a girl takes a picture of herself naked, sends it to her boyfriend, and he sends it around or puts it on the internet or puts it on a porn sharing website, at the moment there's not much we can do legally for that victim, because the police's reaction is, but it was a criminal offense to take that picture. We're desperately trying to change that. And if there are any children listening who have taken these nudes, who have sent nudes, and they're very nervous about what's going to happen to them, I urge them to get in touch with me privately, and that we can try and take steps to get undertakings from the boys that they've sent them to, that they have deleted them, not just from their devices, but from all cloud storage backup devices as well, to make sure that they're not going to come out in years down the line.
I think every parent in the room just went pale, as did those listening. Emma, I wish we had time to carry on. I think we could have gone on for another hour or more, but we are out of time. I'm going to urge everyone listening to get a copy of the book, Selfies, Sex and Smartphones, A Teenager's Online Survival Guide. It is packed full of advice on what to do if you find yourselves in these situations and how to avoid getting into them in the first place. Thank you so much for sharing what you have with us this afternoon. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, and I urge every parent to put it in their child's Christmas stockings this year. I'm treating it like the license to a smartphone. So before you're allowed to drive a car, you have to get a license, and before you're allowed a smartphone, you have to read Emma's book.
License approved. Emma Sadlier, thanks for being with us.